What's the best way to learn fraction, percentage and decimals? One of the most important tools for pre-algebra is the divisibility rule. It makes many complex math problems become much easier to solve. Like prime number, prime factorization, greatest common factor and least common multiple, etc. Before we start, you should already know how to do addition, subtraction, multiplication and division. Now, let's start. How to break down factors? You only need to know the divisibility rules for 2, 3, 5 and 7 to break down all the prime factors for a large number. For example, 840. The last digit is an even number, so it's divisible by 2. The sum of digits is 12 and divisible by 3, so it's divisible by 3. The last digit is 0 or 5, so it's divisible by 5. 4 times 2 minus 8 equals 0, so it's divisible by 7. Then, it's very easy to figure out all the factors. You are welcome to leave some comments about your experiences learning math. How to find the greatest common factor and least common multiple? By applying the divisibility rule, you can easily find the greatest common factor and least common multiple, which are very useful for fraction calculations. To find the greatest common factor, or GCF, you can break down all the numbers to their factors. For example, 840 and 735. You can easily find the GCF, which is 3 times 5 times 7 equals 105. Now, if you calculate 840 over 735, you can use cancelling to simplify the fraction. When you do multiplication or division of fractions, greatest common factor can be very useful. To find the least common multiple, or LCM, you can break down all the numbers to their factors. For example, 840 and 735. You can easily find the LCM, which is 5880. 105 is the greatest common factor, 8 is the unique factor for 840, and 7 is the unique factor for 735. Now, if you calculate addition of fractions, you can use LCM to help simplify the calculation. When you do addition or subtraction of fractions, least common multiple can be very useful. How to convert between improper fraction and mixed fraction? For any fraction greater than 1, there are two important formats: improper fraction and mixed fraction. A fraction whose numerator is greater than or equal to its denominator is called an improper fraction. A fraction whose numerator is less than its denominator is called a proper fraction. A mixed fraction is a mix of a whole number and a proper fraction. To convert an improper fraction to a mixed fraction, you only need to do a simple division. The quotient will become the whole number and the remainder will become the numerator, while there is no change to the denominator. For example, 25 over 8 equals 3 with remainder 1, so it can be converted to a mixed fraction. To convert a mixed fraction to an improper fraction, you only need to do a simple conversion. Here is an example. A mixed fraction is useful to calculate the addition and subtraction of fractions. Here is an example. This is much easier to calculate than the improper fractions. An improper fraction is useful to calculate the multiplication and division of fractions. Here is another example. This is much easier to calculate than the mixed fractions. There is a small trick for the division of fractions. If you divide by a fraction, you can multiply by its reciprocal. A reciprocal is a number, when multiplied together, their product is 1. It's basically just changing the positions of the numerator and denominator. For example, the reciprocal of 3 over 5 is 5 over 3. How to convert between fraction, percentage and decimals? Our next topic is how to convert between fraction, percentage and decimals with ease. To convert fraction to decimals, just use division to calculate the result. To convert percent to decimals, just use division to calculate the result. To convert decimals to fraction, firstly times the multiples of 10 to remove the decimal point, then simplify the fraction. To convert percent to fraction, firstly times the multiples of 10 to remove the percent symbol, then simplify the fraction. To convert decimals to percent, just multiply by 100, then add the percent symbol. To convert fraction to percent, firstly convert fraction to decimals, then convert decimals to percent. With more practice, you can do any operations and conversions with ease. What's the best way to learn different types of numbers? Here we will introduce all types of numbers and related concepts in an easily understandable way. You should already know about counting, decimals, and fractions. Now, let's start. How to understand the whole number and negative number. First concept is natural numbers, also called counting numbers, which are from 1 and up, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Whole numbers include 0 and all natural numbers, like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. To better understand negative numbers, you need to draw a number line, with 0 in the middle. Positive numbers on the right side of the 0 and negative numbers on the left side of the 0. There is a concept, absolute value, which is the distance from 0 on the number line. You should already know how to calculate 9 minus 6. It can also be considered as the sum of 9 and negative 6. Since 9 has greater absolute value than negative 6, the result is a positive number. From the number line, you can easily see the result is 3. But how about 6 minus 9? It can also be considered as the sum of 6 and negative 9. Since negative 9 has greater absolute value than 6, the result is a negative number. From the number line, you can easily see the result is negative 3. For negative numbers, there are some interesting rules. 1. If you subtract a negative number, you add its absolute value. 2. If you do multiplication or division for negative numbers, every two negative numbers become positive numbers. If you can understand negative numbers, the next concept is integers, which are all whole numbers and their negative counterparts, like -5, -4, -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. How to understand irrational number and real number. Then, there is a new concept called rational number, which is any number that can be written as a fraction. All integers can be written as a fraction. All decimals and percentage can be written as a fraction as well. On the other hand, irrational number is a number that cannot be converted to a fraction. What do irrational numbers look like? Before that, you need to know two new concepts, powers and roots. Power represents repeated multiplication of the same number. An exponent is the number of times the base number is multiplied by itself. If you know multiplication, you can easily calculate the power. There are some special situations. 1. Power, for addition and subtraction. The base and exponents have to match exactly. 2. Power, for multiplication and division. The base should match exactly. 3. Exponent, to another power. If a power is being raised to another power, multiply the exponents and leave the base the same. 4. Exponent is 0, the power is always 1. 5. Negative exponent becomes the reciprocal. A root is the exact opposite of a power. 5 to the power of 2 is 25, so the square root of 25 is 5. 5 to the power of 3 is 125, so the cube root of 125 is 5. 2 to the power of 5 is 32, so the fifth root of 32 is 2. Just like division, to calculate the root, it's mostly a guessing game. You may have to try several times to figure out the root. After you understand the power and root, you can better understand what an irrational number looks like. The square root of 2 is an irrational number because you can't get 2 out of the square root, so you can't convert that number to a fraction. There are also some special numbers, like pi, which are also irrational numbers. Finally, we come to the last concept called real numbers, which are all the numbers that can be found on a number line, including all positive and negative numbers, all decimals, all fractions, and all rational and irrational numbers. Let's recap what we have learned by now. How to understand different types of numbers super easy and fast. Natural numbers, also called counting numbers, which is from 1 and up. Whole numbers include 0 and all natural numbers. Integers are all whole numbers and their negative counterparts. Rational number is any number that can be written as a fraction, including all integers. Irrational number is a number that cannot be converted to a fraction. Real numbers are all the numbers that can be found on a number line, including all rational numbers and irrational numbers. With more practice, you can do any operations with any types of numbers with ease. What's the best way to learn algebra? Algebra helps represent problems or situations in the form of mathematical expressions. It uses abstract symbols, like x, y, etc., rather than numbers, to solve problems. Before we start, you should already know how to do addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, exponents, and roots for real numbers. Now, let's start. How to understand the order of operations. 1. Any calculations inside brackets should be done first. 2. Exponents, roots, and absolute value are calculated left to right. 3. Multiplication and division are calculated left to right. 4. Addition and subtraction are calculated left to right. What are variables and expression? Variables are letters or symbols to replace unknown numbers. Expression is a math term that contains numbers, variables, and operators. For example, 6x plus 4 is an expression, while x is a variable. 6 can also be called coefficient, and 4 can be called constant. The objective of algebra is primarily to solve variables. Usually you need equations to solve variables. For example, 6x plus 4 equals 10. If you solve the equation, the solution will be x equals 1. It's always good to check if the solution is correct. You are welcome to leave some comments about your experiences learning math. How to solve equations. For any equation, if you do the same operation on both sides, the equation is still valid. This is very useful to solve the value of variables. For example, x plus 7 equals 13, is the same as x plus 7 minus 7 equals 13 minus 7, so x equals 6, and you solved the x. 5 minus 3x equals 14, is the same as 5 minus 3x minus 5 equals 14 minus 5, so x equals negative 3, and you solved the x. You may have two or more variables, then you need two or more equations. To solve two variables, you can replace one variable with the other. For example, 2x plus y equals 7, so y equals 7 minus 2x, then you can solve the two variables. It's always good to check if the solution is correct. Sometimes, there may be better ways to solve two variables. Just remember, for any equation, if you do the same operation on both sides, the equation is still valid. There could be many different ways to solve two variables. How to solve the quadratic equation. There is a quadratic formula. Here is the quadratic equation of the form. So, a is the coefficient for x squared, which is 1, b is the coefficient for x, which is 2, and c is for the constant, which is 4 minus 7 equals negative 3. Then, you can use the formula to calculate the solution. It's always good to check if the solution is correct. Sometimes, there may be better ways to solve quadratic equations. This is called factoring with binomials. If you know the divisibility rules, you can easily find the two factors with the product equal to constant c, and with the sum equals to coefficient b. How to solve inequalities. In addition to the equation, there are also inequalities, which include greater than and less than. The rules are quite similar to equations. The only difference is that when you multiply or divide by a negative number on both sides, less than will change to greater than, and greater than will change to less than. For example, 5 minus 3x greater than 14 is the same as negative 3x greater than 9. However, the solution is x less than negative 3. How to understand function. The next important concept for algebra is function. But before that, you need to know the coordinate plane, which is a flat surface formed by the intersection of two lines or axes. The horizontal line, known as the x-axis, and the vertical line, known as the y-axis. The intersection of the x-axis and y-axis is called the origin, or 0, 0. To calculate the distance between any 2 points x1, y1 and x2, y2, you can use a formula. A relation is a set of ordered pairs in the coordinate plane. All of the x-coordinates are called the domain, while all of the y-coordinates are called the range. A function is a kind of relationship where there is only one y value for each x value. You can draw a graph on the coordinate plane by using the x, y pairs for the function. If it's a graph for a function, when you draw a vertical line across the graph, it can only touch one point. For any linear function, like y equals 2x plus 3 or y equals negative 5x minus 4, it's always graphed as a line on the coordinate plane. The term slope is referred to as the steepness of the line, and the term y-intercept is the value of y at the point where the line crosses the y-axis. To calculate the slope, there is a formula. x1, y1 and x2, y2 are any of the 2 points on the graphed line. To calculate the y-intercept, just let x equals 0, then the value of y is the answer. For example, 2y equals 4x minus 3, firstly converted to standard format, y equals 2x minus 1.5. Then 2 is the slope, and negative 1.5 is the y-intercept. Nonlinear functions are not straight lines. One example is a quadratic function, which looks like a U-shaped curve. When the coefficient a is greater than 0, it always opens upward. When the coefficient a is less than 0, it always opens downward. After you solve the quadratic equation, you can see what the quadratic function looks like. Here we have listed all the important concepts and knowledge in algebra. With more practice, you can solve problems in algebra with ease.